Previously, we had discussed the three dimensions of organizational commitment, starting with the most important, effective commitment, that emotional attachment that one has to an organization. Emotional attachment, such as wanting to stay there because you appreciate your coworkers, the job that you have, um, your boss, the values the organization stands for. The second type of commitment is continuance, and eh, people stay there because there is a cost that they would incur if they were to leave. I stay because the commute is shorter. I stay because they pay me better. Or I stay because there are no other job opportunities out there. I stay because it would be really hard for me maybe to find another job. And lastly, people also stay because of normative commitment. And normative commitment has to do with some sort of obligation that someone feels. So those are the three components, dimensions of organizational commitment. Now, I want us to look at the impact or how effective commitment comes to be, and what role social bonds play in when we discuss effective commitment. Because as we have seen, effective commitment depends in large part on the connections among people. So there are two models that try to explain these connections and perhaps how people will react. So when we think about which person is more likely to turn over or leave in this model, for example, let's look at who is connected to whom, who's got the most connections. And let's look at the first model, the erosion model. It argues that individuals with only one linkage to other people are more likely to leave. So in this particular network, um, perhaps this individual is that person. So according to the erosion model, if someone were to leave first, it would be this person because it's the least connected. When we look at the social influence model, it argues that not necessarily the opposite, but it's a different perspective. That people with linkages to people that leave to the leavers, those people become at risk for turning over for leaving. So if there is a an individual that is very connected to a lot of people, if that individual were to leave, then how would everybody else feel? For example, there is this individual here in Orange now who has quite a few connections. So if that individual were to leave, maybe this person would follow, or maybe it's just at a high risk of leaving. And so is this, and maybe this person as well, and this person, and this person. So again, these two models are just trying to explain who is more likely to leave, given the very strong component of effective commitment and the connections that we have with people. So now we are back to the original model, three dimensions of commitment. Now we're going to bring one more variable into this model, which are withdrawal behaviors. Um, the text says employees who are not committed to their organizations will engage in withdrawal behaviors. So, what are those withdrawal behaviors? Simply defined set of actions that employees perform to avoid the work situation. So, if uh, the research says that employees are not committed will engage in withdrawal behavior, then this relationship is negative. Simply said, um, more committed to the organization, fewer withdrawal behaviors, and vice versa, like it was stated earlier. I am not committed, low levels of or commitment. That means that I engage in more withdrawal behaviors. There are um, two types of withdrawal behaviors. We have a psychological withdrawal. We also have physical withdrawal behaviors. There are several models that are trying to relate, one group with the other. Um, However, the progression model is the one that probably has the most research support. And this one says that the withdrawal behaviors are positively correlated with one another. In other words, if I am seeing one type of behavior, chances are I'm going to see a tendency. There's going to be an increase in the tendency of exhibiting other types of withdrawal behaviors. So, starting with psychological withdrawals, which are easily, I guess, explained as they're just a mental escape. We start with cyberloafing, which is the most widespread type of psychological withdrawal behavior. Cyberloafing is about using the internet, email, messaging, social media for personal enjoyment, right? Not work duties. I mean, you could be using all that for work, and that would be part of your task performance. But if it's for personal enjoyment, then it becomes cyberloafing. Um, the other type of psychological socializing, everybody knows what that is. Daydreaming, when you appear to be working, but you're distracted by random thoughts or concerns. There's also moonlighting. And moonlighting is when you use your work time and work resources to complete something other than your job. You could be maybe working on another job. You could maybe doing your taxes at work. When you think about it as a student, if you are in a class um, and you are on the internet just, I don't know, watching like a game, that would be cyberloafing. But if you're working on homework from a different class, that would be moonlighting. Um, and the last psychological withdrawal behavior that the textbook looks at is looking busy, where was exactly what it is. You appear to look busy when you really aren't. Moving on to the physical withdrawal, which are about kind of physical escapes, tardiness, uh, kind of coming in late, to work, uh, not showing up for work, absenteeism, uh, taking long breaks, coffee breaks, smoke breaks, lunch breaks, and the ultimate withdrawal behavior, which is quitting, which is also called turnout in HR. So here we have a set of withdrawal behaviors that are negative related to commitment. And as recall, these are behaviors, and as we may have remembered from the past, commitment is an attitude, right? It's an intention to stay, a desire to stay. Um, why is this distinction important while we're still in here? Is that uh, unlike job performance, where everything that we see, whether it's task performance or citizenship behaviors or counterproductive behaviors, all those three components are behaviors. So when we see those, then we're seeing performance or lack of. Here, in order to assess commitment, we need to look at the withdrawal behaviors. So we're going to move on to another section, another in this chapter, and the textbook talks about a taxonomy on how employees may react to negative events. So looking at that, um, there are four primary responses to negative events. One is voice, in which an employee attempts to improve the work situation. We also have exit, where we're trying to end a relationship, the work relationship. In other words, leaving. Loyalty, where whereas an employee remains supportive, but they're hoping for, they're hoping for improvement. Just don't do much. Just sit quiet and put their head down and continue. And then neglect, where there's some reduction in the interest and the effort. So I call it taxonomy because, as we will see more and more in this class, it sometimes is easier for us to understand things when they're in boxes or in a matrix. In this case, it's a 2 by 2 matrix. So if we look at, for example, constructive versus destructive type of behaviors, um, and then that would be on the columns. And then when we look at active roles, so can we think of what is an active and constructive type of behavior? Well, voice, right? I'm actively attempting to improve the work situation. What would be an active destructive? Well, exit. I'm actively leaving the organization. Such we had active, so obviously the opposite of that would be passive. So how do I passively and then constructively respond to a negative event? Um, Loyalty. And then passively and constructively react, it would be neglect. In putting give you an example about what a negative event is. But a negative event could be, I don't know, let's say pay freezes, or even worse, pay cuts. It could also be, a change in supervisors, and you have a supervisor that perhaps is not qualified, and you're having a really hard time. So, what is it that you would do? Would you try to voice your complaint to upper management, go to HR? That would be voice. Or will you perhaps try to just, like, well, this too shall pass, and you engage in loyalty. Maybe you just get fed up and you're like, I'm out, you exit. Or you start engaging in, reducing your interest and effort, and just engage in neglect. Now, how does this, I guess we were talking about negative events, but how does this relate to commitment at all, since this is a chapter? Well, it does. When we think about the primary responses and commitment, can we think of maybe type of responses that tell us something about our level of commitment? Is our level high or low? Um, so some of you might have already figured out that if I have high commitment, I will engage in either actively or passively in voice or loyalty. However, if I have low commitment, um, I may engage in, exit or neglect. And why is this important? Because when we see this, because these are behaviors, remember. So when we see this type of behaviors, then we can infer something about someone's level of commitment. If I see someone that engages in voice when the situation is bad, when we have a negative event, then that tells me that person has high level of commitment. If someone just leaves or starts neglecting the work, then that tells me that their commitment is low. And that's important because we are looking at those behaviors to understand commitment. Because remember, commitment is is an attitude. We can't really see it, but we can see withdrawal behaviors. Another taxonomy that the textbook discusses is the 4 types of employees. Now, in this taxonomy, they're looking at org commitment, high and low, versus task performance, high and low. And we try to categorize each employee based on their levels of performance and commitment. Um, so we have stars, we have lone wolves. Um, Stars are high and high, lone wolves are high task, low commitment. And then we have citizens, which are low task and high commitment. And lastly, apathetics, which are low and low. Now, who do we want as an employee? Now, most of us may say stars, but not everybody can be a star. Not everybody's going to be high and high. Um, let's think about who we don't want. Um, and I think for most of us, we'll probably think that apathetics are the ones we do not want, um, the low and low. But what about the citizens or lone wolves? Who do we pick between those two? Um, and this, it we hear both responses. And depending, it varies, I would say, it varies on the industry and the type of jobs. Maybe some jobs are really high performance, and I don't necessarily care if someone stayed theirs for a while. So maybe I value performance more. So I will want a lone wolf, even if they happen to leave soon. But maybe it's a different type of industry where I want people to be there, the good times and the bad times. So I want my citizens. Never just one answer, right? Always providing context for which is the best situation. What also I want us to remember from here is that employees in this framework, they can move from one quadrant to the other. Um, there could be other factors such as economy. Let's say we have a really good economy. There's a lot of jobs out there. So people that are high performers, stars and lone wolves, for example, um, may lessen their current organization. I don't think it takes a lot for someone to think that if the lone wolf, if this person right here is in this category, if they just get offer another job, um, that pays 10-15% more. I mean, their commitment is low. They just care about, they're gonna get more money somewhere else. So they'll probably be the first ones to leave. Um, so and I say that because sometimes like, well, yeah, we do want the lone wolves because they perform better, but because of their low commitment, they may be the first ones to leave. Um, So I want to wrap this chapter up by discussing another taxonomy. Well, it's kind of the same, but now we're combining two things. We are going to be combining the type of employees and then what kind of response would they have given a negative event. So we're kind of combining the previous two taxonomies. And the textbook talks about and the research shows about that if a star, which is high commitment, will probably engage in voice, which is a constructive and active way of reacting. Whereas a lone wolf will probably engage in exit. You know, they have the credibility, but not the motivation to improve, or maybe not a motivation to, get over this negative event. So they will just exit. Um, Citizens would engage in loyalty because, again, they have high commitment. It's more of a passive um, behavior. And then apathetics would engage in neglect. Again, when we are looking at these types of behaviors, voice, loyalty, neglect, and exit, um, they are clues for us to understand what is the level of commitment of these employees. And therefore, um, if someone is suffering from low commitment, do I want to fix it? Do I not want to fix it? How do we fix low levels of commitment? That's something that you will research more once you think about your coworker, worst coworker, because there are many, there are very high likelihood that that coworker probably showed low levels of commitment. Well, that is all for this chapter. Thank you.